you saw the very best players the entire country has to offer, and you saw it throughout the course of the weekend.
He's growing, he's improving at such a rapid rate. He's going to be a very good player.
This guy's a cross between Sean Marion and Lamar Odom. He's a 6'8" lefty, a high-level athlete, but also got a little bit of point-forward skills in him as he can handle and pass the ball extremely well. At this point, they are simply the standard by which everyone else is judged in prep school basketball. He's considering the likes of Michigan, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas.
All right, on the latest episode of the Upside Podcast, this video edition, we are thrilled to welcome in Texas head coach Shaka Smart. Coach, thanks so much for joining us.
What's up, Fink? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Everybody safe and healthy down there in Austin?
Yeah, just trying to make sense of everything, man, just like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, you guys have had some silver linings in this time, and of course, I'm referring to the commitment and NLI from Greg Brown. Tell me what he means to your program.
Well, we're excited about Greg. First and foremost, he's a terrific kid. He's a young man that we've had the good fortune of getting to know for a long time. So there's a real relationship in place, which is always the way that you want to start any partnership. He's done a great job getting better and better. As you know, Fink, you've watched him over the years. Been a really, really athletic, aggressive, violent player for a long time, but he's done a nice job adding to different parts of his game with outside shooting and ball handling and the defensive end. So we're excited about the impact that he'll have on our team.
You know, he's such an explosive athlete. I don't know him well personally, I should say, but just watching him over the years, you know, over in the grassroots circuits and then in USA basketball, he's such an explosive athlete, but you could see that desire for him to expand his game and to grow his game. And at first, I remember thinking when he was kind of a sophomore, it almost came at the cost of his efficiency, but it seemed in recent years that he's kind of figured out how to grow but still be efficient. I'm sure that's going to be, well, of course it's going to be part of the process with you guys, get him to play to his strengths but still develop the rest of his game.
Well, one thing that Greg's always been really good about is understanding what he does best, and I think he gets that from his dad. His dad has always really emphasized for Greg to play with a level of aggressiveness and go after the basketball. And there's been a huge emphasis from day one on rebounding, which is something that he can do really, really well. And as I mentioned, he's also gotten better and better on the defensive end. Obviously, that's not an area that gets a ton of attention in the rankings or whatever it may be. But I think he has actually just as much potential on that end of the floor as he does on offense.
And is that, I would think versatility would be a part of that. When people talk about versatility, they typically mean positions. But to me, he's a guy that has defensive versatility with regard to tempo as well. He can thrive defending the length of the floor. If you're going to run and jump, he should be able to defend different positions in the half court. Does that give you extra flexibility in terms of the way you can utilize him and the way you can craft lineups next year?
Absolutely. It's a great point, Fink. On one hand, he's going to be a freshman, so there's certainly adjustments and transitions to the college level on the defensive end, particularly. But on the other end, he's a 6'9" athlete who's a very good mover and has the ability to guard smaller guys and even maybe guard guys that are maybe even a little bit taller than him. So he has tremendous defensive versatility. That's something, if you look at the best defensive teams, or at least a lot of them, that's something that they have in common is they have some personnel like Greg that are guys that can defend different spots, switch if necessary, as you mentioned, extend the floor if you want, but also be really in the half court.
You mentioned something there that I'd love to drill down on a little bit. The freshman transition on the defensive end of the floor. I think most people, not even just necessarily uneducated people, but I think most people think, hey, he's an athlete, he's going to be able to defend, or hey, he's an athlete, he's got a motor, he's got to be able to defend. But as you go on in level, there becomes such a, whether it's terminology or just various concepts, it becomes a big mental transition as well. Could you talk about, not specific to Greg, but just for a freshman, maybe even an athletic freshman, what some of those big transition markers are.
It's a great point, Fink. It's something that we, for whatever reason over the years, going back several years, have spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about. And we've actually even developed what we call a freshman remediation program. I know that sounds
no, not at all
basic,
That's
but
great.
the reality is, I mean, as an older player, a sophomore, junior, or senior, you've just seen certain things in college basketball that freshmen have not seen. And this is regardless of talent level. So what we've tried to do is create a program that's pretty organized to kind of lay out what are the areas that an incoming guy may need to be brought up to speed on. Things like transition defense, Fink. Most of the time, that's an area that freshmen are a little bit behind on compared to older guys. And particularly when you're talking about an incoming guy that's an impact player like a Mo Bamba or like a Greg Brown, those are the guys you got to bring up to speed even quicker because, maybe with other guys, you can take your time and they can kind of learn over the course of time. But obviously with somebody like Greg or somebody like Mo, when he was here a few years ago, man, we got to do everything we can to have him ready to be good in those areas like transition defense on day one.
And is that program basketball specific, or because I know from what I know of your style, it is and correct me if I'm not articulating this properly, but I would call it a holistic style. I know relationship building is huge to you. So is this freshman, I forget the verbiage exactly, but is this freshman program specific to on the court, or does it encompass more than that?
We have one on the court, Fink. What I'm talking about is more specific to basketball concepts, but actually, since you bring it up, we also do what we call freshman orientation, which is something that is ongoing throughout the freshman year. You've been around college basketball a long time. You probably agree with this. I don't really think the transition to college is complete until your freshman season is over.
Yeah.
Then you take a week or two off, you get away from it a little bit, you walk back in the gym and you just have a different look to you. You have a clearer mind, that the smoke is cleared a little bit and you can see things, a lot better than you could when you first came in. And hopefully over time for any freshman, any player, you're better in November than you were in October. You're better in December than you were in November. But I don't really think it's until that season ends and that player comes back in the gym, a week or two later that it's complete. That's what's been so tough about this, this stretch that we're in right now. We haven't had that moment yet when the guys come back in the gym. Everybody had to go home really as soon as the season ended. And then, everyone's kind of been in separate places. But the freshman orientation is more about the mental and emotional adjustment to the college level, which actually, in my belief, really precedes anything basketball-wise, because you can understand something like transition defense. You can understand better how to guard an out-of-bounds play than you did when you were in high school. But if your mind's not clear, or if emotionally you're not in a good place, or you're not ready, which is probably the most important adjustment going from high school to college, is just being ready mentally and physically, then it doesn't really matter what you know.
Right. With regard to the freshmen, you've obviously had tremendous success. You mentioned Mo Bamba, obviously Greg. These are guys that are perceived to be one and done prospects, and obviously Mo was. I know that's probably that's got to be a very fine line between. So there's a couple of different things I'm curious about. Getting those guys to really buy in, and what I think speaks to that, especially with Greg, is you were recruiting against, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but now you're recruiting against the NBA G League as well, who can come in and throw down a paycheck of anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, and that's before they have the opportunity for endorsements. So I guess a two-part question: what is the value in the college experience now, and for those potential one and done candidates? And then how do you fight the get the buy-in with guys who potentially may not be there for more than a year?
That's a great question, Fink. And I think the value in the college experience or the value in the G League pathway, that has to be determined by the young man and his family. I don't think it makes sense to anyone to say that value is the same for player A and his family and player B and his family and player C and their family. Everybody's situation is so different. And that's what is so complex, Fink, about all these conversations that are ongoing, whether it's name, image, and likeness, the transfer situation, the one and done, should that be gotten rid of, is that there is no model that fits everyone perfectly. Obviously, the very, very, very best players have the ability in basketball to at least be highly sought after at the highest level, even before they leave high school. And that may be different than certain other sports. But we're talking about the 1% of the 1%. So in answer to your question, I think that has to be determined by the young man and his family. I know, just using Mo as an example, Fink, he was a guy that really thought beyond just basketball.
Yeah.
His mentality as he went through the recruiting process was, how can I maximize my experience and make the most of the 10 months that I'll be on a college campus, but not just from the standpoint of that 10 months, how can I build connections and relationships and utilize people moving forward for many, many, many years after that? And so he was really, really smart to think through that on the front end. And to be honest with you, Fink, that's a big part of why he came to Texas, because as you know, he had all the best options out there in college basketball, but he believed that there were some real strengths here that he could tap into, both on the side of relationships within our program and outside of our program, and then also with opportunities that down the road he could take advantage of.
The moment that I'm visualizing as I listen to you talk about Mo in particular was after your last game that season. I think you were doing press or some sort of post-game interview, and Mo happened to be walking by, and I remember just, it was almost, it wasn't, he just walked right in and gave you a big hug, even though, he knew you were doing the interview. But so I think that speaks to what you're saying, even the relationship building, even in these more, even in these smaller windows in certain cases. And that's why now you've been, is it the last 2 years you've been in the green room with your guys?
We've had 3 straight years, Fink. We've had a big man that's been chosen in the first round, but they've all been really different. Mo's really the only one, Fink, that came in knowing absolutely I'm going to be one and done.
Right. No doubt.
Jared Allen is a guy that preceded him by a year, that was a McDonald's All-American, was obviously highly recruited. But, if you ask Jared now, he'll tell you he really came in with the mentality of, I just want to have the absolute best freshman year I can have. If that means I can go to the NBA after that, great. If not, I'll come back another year and continue to develop. And then the year after Mo, last season, 2018-19, we had Jackson Hayes, and his story is about as unique as I've ever seen, Fink, in that he's a guy that literally couldn't get off the bench for his high school team as a junior. And by the time he signed with us, still had not started a high school game, was kind of a throw-in on Romeo Langford's AAU team. That was the only spring and summer he played AAU. But I think what people started to realize between the spring and summer going into his senior year was that this guy is on an absolute rocket ship in terms of his development and growth physically and also as a basketball player. And that development continued while he was here. Again, the vast majority of the credit for that goes to Jackson and just the genetic lottery that he won. But he got so much better that he ended up being in a position where at the end of the season, he was a consensus lottery pick. I'll never forget, Fink, his mom called me and she said, is there any way you can talk him into coming back for a sophomore year?
No, I'm sorry.
A great woman, Christy Hayes, actually a former terrific basketball player and a college basketball coach. She didn't feel like emotionally, she wasn't sure if he was, ready for that jump, which is certainly understandable for any mother. And I remember telling her, there's no way. I mean, he just got the feedback back from the underclassmen advisory committee. I think it was like 90% of them said he would be a lottery pick. He was, had just been named freshman of the year in the league. And again, he was just going like this. So, every situation has been different with those guys. But what they all have in common is they've all been highly receptive to, again, the mental and emotional areas where they needed to grow and improve in order to play their best.
And that trend would seem likely to continue because I know your front court is absolutely loaded next year. We talked about Greg. Can you talk about just a couple of the other guys in that front court who, and not even necessarily with their NBA aspirations, but what they can do to help you next season with that group in particular? Because I think that's as good of a front court as there is in college basketball.
Well, I think, Fink, we have to make sure as coaches that we don't have a selective amnesia. The success of the team, it goes hand in hand with NBA aspirations. So, I think, sometimes coaches want one without the other. That's not realistic. And that's, to be honest, it's a little patronizing to the players. But, to answer your question, we do have really good depth in the front court. We just have a unique situation. As you know, Fink, we've been really young as a team over the last 3-4 years. And, because of that, you have some challenges like a lot of teams. And then we've lost, our best player each year with those one and dones. We're in a situation right now, and you know how the offseason can be, but as of today, where we literally have everybody on our roster, coming back, and then we're adding Greg. So our front court is one that'll be, very competitive. Jericho Sims is a young man that will be a senior. He actually came in with Mo a few years ago and demonstrated a ton of promise and a ton of athleticism. He's a very, very good athlete and has a great body. But he's gotten better and better. This past year, his junior season was by far his best. Unfortunately, it was cut short by a back injury, and he was not able to play in our last 7 or 8 games. So he's excited about getting 100% healthy and then getting back on the court and continuing the growth that he really demonstrated this past year. Kai Jones is another guy in our front court that, has a ton of potential. Came in as a freshman last year, and as you know, Fink was still learning, to play away from the basket. He kind of always played the 5 his whole life, and had a really successful season with Jason Smith at Brewster the year before. But just went through that same adjustment going from high school to college that all these guys have to go through. Plus, he was playing a different spot, so that was a learning curve for him. But he really, really accelerated in the last month or so of the season. You could see the wheels turning in his head. You could see the smoke kind of clearing and having a better understanding. Will Baker's another young man that came in as a freshman and, again, like Kai, went through some of the challenges of being a freshman, some of the, unknown adjustments that you're going to have to make that we try to prepare guys for, but you're never fully ready for until you go through them.
Right.
And then we've got a few other guys as well that we think have a chance to help us on the front line. So it's going to be competitive. But at the end of the day, it's about, putting guys out there in a position where they can really attack and be successful.
Well, and the thing that's interesting to me about that group is not only are they talented, but they complement each other in so many different ways. They're not all cut from the same cloth. You've got positional versatility. You've got guys who play different ways, and so I think it's going to be a really fun group to watch. I want to turn the page a little bit and ask you about something else you have, and I I don't have the numbers on this, but you have a rapidly growing coaching tree in terms of former assistants who are now Division I head coaches. If it's not the biggest in college basketball, it's certainly got to be up there. I would suspect it is the biggest. And the thing is they're all really good jobs. And I mean, that's the thing that coaches don't always like to acknowledge is some jobs are better than others. But is it 5 former assistants that are Division I head coaches right now?
Let's see. I think it's 7 or 8.
Is it really? I apologize. Then it is the that's gotta be, that's incredible. That's incredible. And so many not just mid to high major jobs, but if it's low to mid major jobs, like really good jobs. I mean, is that a tangible goal, or what's at the root of that? That's an incredible accomplishment for you and your staff.
Well, I'll tell you what, Fink, I think most coaches will tell you that when you first become a head coach, one of the kind of hidden areas that becomes really, really enjoyable that maybe you didn't think as much about when you were an assistant coach is just how much fun it is to have a coaching staff and have a bunch of guys that, you're on the same page with and you're in the foxhole with and you roll your sleeves up with. I remember when we first got to VCU, and if you remember, Fink, I was following an extremely successful coach in Anthony Grant, who, had one of the best seasons in all of college basketball this past season at Dayton.
Right.
But I was replacing Anthony, and for the first really several months, it felt like the players were taking it out on me that there had been a coaching change.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not the only, new coach that's gone through that, but it was really the coaching staff and the guys that I was around on a daily basis that, helped me, get through that and be okay with all the twists and turns that we were going through. And so to see those guys develop and grow, first as part of the coaching staff, but then, in their own head coaching positions, and to see them win and to see them advance to the NCAA tournament. To be honest with you, it's just as gratifying and just as much fun as it is to see a guy get picked in the NBA draft and go on to have success after college, whether it's in basketball or some other area. So that's been a lot of fun. I think some of them might argue with you about how great their jobs are. But, what they all have in common is they're all, kind of like you said about a front court, they're all, go about it their own ways. None of them are exactly the same, but they all, I take a lot of, not so much pride, but I take a lot of enjoyment in seeing this. They all have really made it about the people around them. And that's been really cool because, relationships are, something that we've always really emphasized. And I think that's a term, Fink, that everybody throws around, and, it's easy to have a word up on the wall.
Yeah, right.
See guys, leave the program and go build one of their own and bring those sorts of things to life in, a completely different part of the country is pretty cool.
And you've maintained relationships. We talked about some of the high profile guys in the NBA, but talk to me about some of those VCU guys who just grinded their way into the NBA. And from what I'm told, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, you remain very close with a lot of those old VCU guys.
Well, listen, Fink, I'm a guy who played Division III basketball and was raised by a single mom. So it was really coaches that were father figures for me. And, because of that, I try to take on that role, maybe not so much a father figure, but a strong male figure. Sometimes might be more of a big brother or an uncle or a father, but it's a figure that I really enjoy playing that role in their lives. It took me a long time, Fink, to realize that not everybody looks at coaches the way that I did when I played.
Right.
I mean, I looked at those guys like they were the second coming. And if they told me, go run 100 miles, I was going to do my best to go run 100 miles. And I've learned that, it's not necessarily the case with everybody, and that's fine.
Right.
But absolutely, that one of my most enjoyable, parts of my day is getting a chance to reconnect with whether it's former players, former staff members, guys I used to work with. I got a call from one of our managers from VCU yesterday.
Wow.
And it's pretty neat. He had written this piece about the old practice gym at VCU. I don't know, Fink, if you ever got a chance to go.
I haven't. Yeah.
Gym. But it's in a lot of ways is the opposite of the Taj Mahal of a practice facility that they have there now. But it's really what made us who we were.
Right.
No air conditioning, no frills, not the nicest place. In the summer, it would get, easily 110, 120 degrees. So this manager called me, and he had written this unbelievable kind of piece about the old practice gym because it just got torn down. And so those sorts of things, man, those are priceless. And to see those guys move on and do great things, even outside of basketball, is pretty cool.
Now, I know I'm monopolizing your time here, so I will end on these last two quick questions. You mentioned your day. Obviously, everyone's days are a lot different right now. So these last two questions are completely self-serving as I try and organize my day. But what is your daily structure look like right now amongst these unprecedented times?
Well, I'll tell you what, Fink, as we're getting right.
I'm not doing 100 burpees though. I saw that. I'm not doing it. So.
As we're getting right up to 2 months of this time where we've been asked to work from home and pretty much quarantined to our own homes. I'm still struggling to some extent with figuring that routine out. I've never been big, Fink, on doing a ton of work from home. Obviously you always make recruiting calls and watch some tape at home, but I really like being in the office. And I came up like most guys as a GA and as an assistant coach where you get there early and you stay late. So it's been quite an adjustment. For me, Fink, I always start the day with, some sort of spiritual work, just because I think for all of us to, try to make sense of what's going on, the first thing is really raising our awareness, our consciousness of where we're at and what we're thinking and how we're feeling. And then from there, I just jump into whatever it is we got going on. It's a lot of Zoom calls, try to communicate with our guys and our staff. Recruiting, as has become, something that can only be done on the phone and on the computer right now. So, that's where, we focus a lot of our energy and time as well. And then it's also a great opportunity this time that we're going through to learn some things and, step back a little bit and maybe evaluate what you've done, not just in the past season, but in previous seasons, and then look at what other people are doing that's been really successful for them.
All right. Last question. I have been told by a member of your staff who will remain nameless. I said, Coach is a big reader, right? And he said, no, a voracious reader. And so what are you read? What's the best book you've read either in this time or this year? Because I need new recommendations. And you know what, this is a question that it sounds like I'm saying it in jest, but it's a question that I've started to ask more and more, and I've gotten some incredible answers.
What kind of book do you want, Fink?
It can be, well, I'll tell you this. My last two books, this is how different it went from We Were 8 Years in Power from to Nessie Coates, and now now I'm reading Habits. So it can go all different kinds. Anything that speaks to you or motivated you or just really impacted you. Or even what you're reading now.
There's so many great books to recommend. One of my favorite things right now, Fink, is got to go ahead from our compliance to send each of our players a book. So I've picked kind of a different book for each of those guys.
Very Phil Jackson of you.
And, yeah, exactly. Listen, man, everything in coaching is stolen.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, I'll recommend to you the book that probably has been most impactful to me in the past 5 years or so. And then you might read it and say, this is completely not helpful, but at least I've told you what's most effective for me. It's a book called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
I like it.
Yeah, this is, I think it applies to everything, basketball, work, life, but it's very spiritual in nature. But it's one that I think is really, really applicable to all of us right now as we try to make sense of what's going on. Really excited, Fink, that a couple of our players have really, really gotten into that particular book. And now they're calling me and wanting to talk about it. So
cool.
check that one out and see what you think. And if you need one that's on a different topic, then hit me back.
No, that's on my list, Coach. I really appreciate this. You're very generous with your time. This was a very interesting conversation, and I can't thank you enough for making the time.
Well, Fink, I just want to say thanks for everything you do. And, I think you're one of the guys that really goes about what you do with a pure mind and a pure heart to, just try to help people. And you can tell you love the game and you love the people involved in the game. So, I know you and I haven't spent a ton of time together, but I got a ton of respect for you. And, I enjoy following what you do.
That's very, very kind of you to say. Thanks so much, Coach.
You got it. You take care.
All right. Stay safe.